Here to help us sort out the challenges that face millennials in this election year, especially millennial women, is Jennifer Lawless, Director of Women in Politics Institute and faculty affiliate for the Center for Congressional and Presidential Studies at the School of Public Affairs at American University. She is the author of Running for Office: Why Young Americans Are Turned Off to Politics, and Becoming a Candidate, Political Ambition, and the Decision to Run for Office. She is a nationally recognized expert on women in politics. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer Lawless.
Thank you very much. Before I begin my remarks, I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. I will always hold a warm place for the League of Women Voters in my heart because in 2006, I ran for Congress in Rhode Island's 2nd Congressional District against an incumbent in a primary, and the incumbent wasn't that interested in having debates, and when the League of Women Voters called for a debate, he knew he could not say no. And in fact, it was that televised debate, which I clearly won, that that gave quite a degree of legitimacy to the campaign, and although I lost the race, certainly propelled us and allowed us to do far better than anybody expected. So thank you for that. So let me just begin my remarks by sharing with you a few words. Cockroaches, head lice, colonoscopies, Brussels sprouts, used car salesmen, and root canals. Do you know what all of these things have in common? They're all more popular than the United States Congress. It is true, in head-to-head matchups where a random sample of national voters was asked what do they prefer, the US Congress fared worse on all of those indicators. Now, members of the House and Senate might take solace in knowing that they did do a little bit better than North Korea and the Ebola virus. But the margins were actually quite close. But it's not just these cute little head-to-head polls that demonstrate that we have a national problem here. The political climate today has culminated in the worst popularity ratings we've ever seen in Washington. Not even 1 in 5 voters trusts the United States government to do what's right most of the time. Congressional approval regularly hovers at around 10%. And Senator John McCain even joked that that number is only a result of family members and staffers saying they approve of the job Congress does. For decades, voters have said that they don't really like Congress, they don't really like our political institutions, but they do really like their incumbents and their own members, and they want to re-elect them. But even that reality was turned on its head, at least in terms of polls, heading into the 2014 elections. A national polling firm asked thousands of Americans, what do you think would work better, the current Congress or replacing every single member with a random person walking down the street? And 49% of Americans chose the random group of people. So basically, public condemnation toward the political system really couldn't be more complete. And what I want to talk about today, and what Richard Fox and I talk about in our book, Running from Office, are the political consequences for the next generation when we hold a political system in such low regard. How does this affect the prospects for a high-functioning democracy moving forward? And what does it mean for young people who have only been socialized amid what we might consider dysfunction? And in a nutshell, I'm going to argue that Washington's dreadful performance over the course of the last decade or so has had a profound impact on the young women and men who have come to learn about the political system during this time. But before I provide evidence for this argument, I just want to set something straight. I think it's very important that the government is doing its work. I think it's very important that Americans believe in the political system, and I think it's very important that we follow politics. And from the time that I could walk, I was a political junkie. Election day is my Super Bowl. The Sunday morning talk shows are my favorite reality TV. My friends and I, this is terrible, you won't want to be friends with us, play a game. The winner is the person who can write down the most US senators. I get very, very upset when I don't actually reach 100. And this is not something new to me. As a 2-year-old, my parents told me that I was actually obsessed with Jimmy Carter. I was worried about his legacy. I was concerned about whether he was going to be able to achieve all that he set out to do. When Carter left the White House, devastated as I was, my political interest remained intact. I remember, this is my first political memory, as a 5-year-old watching the Iranian hostages disembark from the plane at Andrews Air Force Base. At 9, I enthusiastically pulled the lever with my mother when we went to vote in the 1984 presidential election. At age 12, I faced a crisis that summer. I could either hang out at the pool with my friends or I could watch the Iran-Contra hearings. I basically spent more time that summer with Oliver North than I did my friends. By the time I was a junior in high school, I knew my way around a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing like nobody's business. And in January of 1996, when I was a junior in college, my roommate came home very upset because this guy she had been dating had just broken up with her. And I explained that I would be more than happy to discuss the events once Bill Clinton finished his State of the Union address. And so growing up in a pretty politicized household, my parents never ran for office, but we had lawn signs and they always voted and we talked about politics regularly. It was clear that this was something that I would just study in life and care about. No one was surprised when I majored in political science. Nobody was surprised when I got a PhD in political science. Nobody was surprised when I became a professor of political science. And frankly, nobody was that surprised when I decided to run for office, although running as a relatively newcomer to the state of Rhode Island when I still didn't have tenure might have shocked a few people. But I was always proud to be politically involved, and I've always thought that government is an effective way to solve problems, that the people who run for office, generally speaking, have good intentions, that a career in politics is noble, and that there could be little as satisfying as hearing and heeding a call to public service. And so it's from that framework that we wrote the book, and it's also from that framework that both Richard Fox and I became so disheartened. Because what we did was conduct a national survey of high school and college students, so about 4,200 13 to 25-year-olds. And we asked them about their political interest. We asked them about whether they'd ever consider running for office later in life. We asked them about their thoughts and attitudes toward our elected officials and the political system. And in a nutshell, all of the news we uncovered was bad. Let me just give you a brief summary. 89% of the young people that we surveyed and interviewed said that under no circumstances whatsoever would they ever run for office. And frankly, it's hard to blame them. All they know is gridlock, inefficiency, stalemate. All they know is partisan fighting. All they know is an inability to get the job done. But it's not only identifying this problem, it's also demonstrating how deeply rooted it is that becomes the challenge that we need to overcome today. So I just want to highlight some of the basic statistics and findings that we uncovered in the book, and then conclude with what this means especially for the work that women's organizations and the League can do, and how in particular we might be able to motivate young women to get more involved in politics. So let me just give you the brief summary of affairs. So as I mentioned, we asked questions in a couple of different ways. The first way we asked was, have you ever considered running for office? And 89% of people said, no, we haven't considered it. And it doesn't matter how we slice or dice the data. If you look at race, if you look at region, if you look at religious affiliation, if you look at frequency of church attendance, the numbers vary maybe from like 87 to 92%, but generally speaking, 9 out of 10 young people have decided, no way, not doing it. Then we said to them, all right, think about it right now. Can you envision any scenario in the future where you might be interested in running for office? And it got even worse. 93% said no. So then we thought, all right, maybe we're asking the question wrong. Let's give them some scenarios. Maybe they're envisioning all of these opportunities that don't really exist, and that's why running for office isn't on their radar screen. So first we said, okay, imagine the following 4 professions and think about it this way. Pretend they all pay the same amount of money and involve the same investment of time. Which would you most like to be? A small business owner, a teacher, the mayor of a city or a town, or a salesperson? Mayor of a city or town came in distant 3rd, and it was almost tied with salesperson for 4th. Then we said, okay, imagine these higher echelon jobs. Again, same rules apply. They all pay the same amount of money, and they all involve the same investment of time. Which would you most like to be? A lawyer, a business executive, a high school principal, which quite frankly I think is the worst job in the entire world, or a member of Congress. Member of Congress came in dead last, and it wasn't even close. So then we thought, wait, maybe we're asking the question wrong still. this can't be. How can this be? So we gave them a list of 20 different professions. Everything you could imagine: lawyer, business leader, journalist, doctor, nurse, electrician, plumber. And in this list of 20, we also included mayor, state legislator, and member of Congress. And we said, here are 20 positions. Check off all that you might even have the smallest modicum of interest in doing. People could check off all 20 if they wanted. And then we rank ordered the popularity of the 20 jobs. Member of Congress, state legislator, and mayor of a town came in 17th, 18th, and 19th out of 20. The only thing that came in worse was electrician. We don't understand why, but our next book will be trying to understand why young people don't want to be electricians. And in a final attempt to sort of see some kind of silver lining, we just asked them, in addition to doing these surveys, we also conducted 115-hour-long phone interviews with a random sample of these kids and young women and men. And we said to them in these interviews, all right, well, when you think about running for office, you know, that's a pretty exciting thing. We basically suggested that it was a great idea. What's your reaction? And let me just read you 3 of the best responses we got. This is from Charlotte. She's a high school junior in Texas. No. People in politics are squirrely. They say they're going to do something, but they don't do it. I'd never be part of that. Then there was Thornton. He was a college senior from New York. He said, I'm going into farming. Politics is for people who like to bang their heads against the wall. I'd rather milk cows than run for office. And then there was Franklin. He was a college sophomore from Iowa, and he said, look, by the time you're done with politics, your hair is gray. I want to keep my hair not gray. I don't even want to think about running for office. And so it's hard to imagine more consistent evidence. No matter how we ask the question, no matter what we uncover, we find that young people are generally very turned off to the idea. And we found this for 3 reasons. Or not for 3 reasons, it manifested in 3 ways. The first was that they don't talk about politics at all with their families or friends. And they don't talk about politics with their families because what happened, and when I say they don't talk about it, 75% say that they don't engage in any kind of regular conversation with their parents about politics. 50% say that they've never had a political conversation with their parents. And we conducted this survey exactly 4 years ago in the middle of the general election. So it's October of 2012. If you don't talk about politics then, you're never going to. And when we asked why, it was because they said that politics is argumentative, it's confrontational, it's generally yucky. If they're talking to their friends, if they're talking to their families, why would they want to be engaged in a discussion that could potentially lead to a fight or that would just end in a general conclusion that Washington can't get anything done? The second reason, they think politicians are horrible people. We asked on a broad variety of traits and characteristics how they would rate politicians in general when they think about them. And it wasn't even close. Politicians were rated as far more likely to be selfish than selfless, self-interested than willing to help the community, egotistical rather than a normal person. And we also asked these people if they thought they had leadership skills. And they said, yeah, but politicians don't. So there's a disconnect there. And then the third reason was, when they looked around, they said that electoral politics was just not a way to get anything done. The good news was that about 80% said that improving the world and improving their communities and improving society was a goal of theirs for the future. It was right up there with getting married and having children and wanting to achieve financial success. But when we asked them the best way they thought to do it, every other option was better than running for office. So working behind the scenes, starting an NGO, staging an economic boycott, sending a message via Facebook. All of these they thought were more effective routes to actually improve society than throwing their own hats into the ring. Now the good news is that that small sliver of people, that 11% that actually had considered running for office, were systematically different than anybody else, and they provide help for us in understanding why. They were the few people that did talk about their families with politics. They were the ones who did take political science classes at school. They were the ones who admired at least one politician. They were the ones who were exposed to more news coverage. And so what we found, and the argument we make in the book, is that if we can incentivize political engagement, if we can encourage more young people to follow politics more regularly, they might actually be more interested in running for office. Because when you turn on the TV right now or you scan the internet, it's very, very easy to come upon very negative stories of men behaving badly. But everyone's now thinking of men behaving badly. But if you wade through that muck, and if you watch a little bit more or scan a little bit deeper, it's also pretty easy to come upon stories of politicians who are quite successful, who are achieving good things in their communities, and who really are trying to make a difference. It's just that most people are so turned off so quickly by what they see that they don't give themselves a chance to see the system working. And so what we do is we end the book with 5 recommendations. I'm only going to talk about one today because I want you to buy the book. I can't tell you everything. Again, type this in right now, Running from Office, Why Young Americans Are Turned Off to Politics. I'll get like 50 cents if you buy it. But the one recommendation that I want to talk about briefly before we open this up to questions is closing the gender gap in political ambition among young women. So the one thing that we found, when I said that the demographic differences were all generally the same, there was one difference. And that was among 18 to 25-year-olds, among the college students, there was a 20 percentage point gap in interest in running for office, where men were far more likely than women to say it was something they wanted to do. We found virtually no gap among the high school students. So in high school, young boys and girls are equally interested, or in this case, not interested, in running for office. When they step foot on a college campus, women's ambition stays flat and men's shoots up. Men are more likely to take political science classes. They're more likely to engage in activities like college Democrats or college Republicans. They're more likely to join the debate club, mock trial, and varsity sports, all of which foster a competitive spirit and all of which correlate with interest in running for office. Yet, the women who do those things turn out to be just as likely as the men to say that they too are interested in running for office. And this is where women's organizations and the League and anybody that cares about getting young women involved in politics can make a difference. We've now identified that key point where women are turned off, where women say the political system is just not for me, where millennials say, you know what, none of the candidates gets what's going on here, and women in particular feel disenchanted. If we can tie young women's self-interest to the political system and let them realize that there are certain things that only elected officials can do. There are certain things, I know it's going to be bad news for them, that Facebook cannot handle. It might be a way to generate interest, and it might be a way to let them realize that running for office is in fact a way to solve problems. And to do so, in addition to showing them that there's a direct link between the issues that they care about, like student loan debt, like access to contraception, like healthcare, like a stable economy for the future, we also need to tell them what happens when women run for office, because there are tons of myths out there that we need to debunk. Danny Hayes, who's a professor at George Washington University, and I just wrote a book. It's called Women on the Run. You can buy that too. And it looks at women's experiences when they run for office. And basically, we debunk all of the myths out there. When women run for office, they're just as likely as men to win their races. When women run for office, they raise just as much money as men. When women run for office, they receive similar media coverage systematically, both in terms of volume and content. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are not helping our argument. But they are an exception to a rule. We looked at more than 850 congressional contests in 2010 and 2014, and it is a 200-page book of non-findings. Women's experiences now are very similar to men's. The perception of gender bias against women when they run for office, though, is through the roof. 60% of people believe that women endorse sexist media coverage. 65% of people believe that the media don't treat women fairly and focus too much on their appearance. 50% believe that women have to be twice as good to get half as far. And 40% believe women can't win and can't raise money. Is it really a surprise, then, that even young women don't think that they're qualified to run for office and don't think that the political system is hospitable to them? What we need to do is chip away at those myths, explain that Hillary Clinton is in fact an anomaly and that the 500,000 elected offices across the country generally don't involve that degree of scrutiny or an opponent like Donald Trump, and let women know that they are in fact as qualified as men to run. Because we also know that when more women participate in the political system, it sends the signal that the political system actually can address what matters to women. And that's what we're all here to do, closing that gap in ambition, getting women interested in politics, and making sure that in the future they run for and not from office is going to be an incredible challenge, but it's one that I'm sure we're all up to. So thank you very much.
Well, this is the League of Women Voters, and I've never seen a convention where we didn't have questions for the speaker. So now is the time. If you want to come to any of the mics, don't worry about the pros or the cons, any of the mics, and if you spread it. And please remember, convention rules do apply. Please identify yourself by name and league so that we know where you're from. And I will take a question from microphone 3.
Is this 3? It is. I'm Dorrit Marks from the Miami-Dade League of Women Voters of Florida. Thank you for your interesting talk. My question relates to Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone, and I read another book just recently, whose name I already forgot. But the point they were making was that the key is participation. And of course, the key to democracy and to the League of Women Voters really is also participation. So you're asking like one question about running for office, but rooted behind that is really, do they participate in the PTA and all the local possible organizations, including the League of Women Voters?
Now keep in mind these were young people, so half the sample were between the ages of 13 to 17, the other half were 18 to 25, and the 18 to 25-year-olds were still all at least part-time college students, so the extent to which they're fully civically minded at this point and civically engaged is somewhat limited. But we found very, very high levels of volunteerism. And we found very high levels, like about 77% said that they did some kind of engagement in their community. What we found also was that it was because they thought it would help them get into college. The good news is that because the college admissions process incentivized volunteerism and community engagement, young people actually did it, and even if they don't all stick with it, it means that the ingredients are planted for a future life of civic engagement. So imagine, in terms of political aptitude, what we could accomplish if the college admissions process valued political engagement in any way, shape, or form. My sense is that young people would say, all right, got to do that because I want to get into college. 88% of our high school students said that their #1 goal in life at that point was to get into college. So if we told them that that means you have to attend a political meeting on occasion or you have to go with your parents to vote, my bet is they would.
Great. All right, so we started with microphone 3. I'm going to come back around to 1 and go in order, if that's okay with everybody, so that I make sure I don't miss anyone. So I'm going to go back to microphone 1.
All right. I'm Beth Springston, North Carolina, representing the Wake League, although I'm from Charlotte, Mecklenburg. And my memory back in the 60s is we were the same way. We never talked about politics. The politicians were those old, gray-haired white guys. And as the 60s went along, we were certainly very active, but it wasn't with the idea of running for office. So I wondered about your historical comparison to these current numbers.
That's an excellent question, especially because a lot of people remember being not particularly engaged and thinking that politics was not a noble profession. We were the first people to do a national survey of interest in running for office, but the things that we found that predict interest in running, like talking to your family about politics, following the news, taking political science classes, caring about politics, have been questions that survey researchers have asked for 50 and 60 years. And when we went back and looked and compared the silent generation to the baby boomers, to Generation Xers, to millennials, there's been a significant decline in all of those measures. So it might very well be the case that we were never at the point where 80% of people would have said that they wanted to run for office. But we know for sure that interest in politics, following the news, and general attitudes toward politicians have gotten much, much worse over time. And it's been a pretty steady decline, except when we go from Generation X to the millennials, it's a really sharp decrease. And so it's this generation that has only been raised amid dysfunction. Previous generations saw episodes of it, but there generally were times when politicians would come together and solve problems. If you were born in the mid to late 1990s, it's possible that you've actually never seen that happen.
Microphone 2.
Mary Ann Barnes from Greater Cleveland League in Ohio. Do you feel that our current civics education in both secondary, primary and secondary school, I say primary too, is up to snuff for both generating people interested in running office as well as generating an interest in voting when they become of voting age?
No.
What would you do
I
to
can
improve it?
elaborate in 2 ways. The first is that it's gotten to the point now where the public schools across the country are mired in political debates that make it virtually impossible to teach anything controversial. And so we're not only talking about evolution, we're talking about even presenting the Constitution and having a conversation about what the First Amendment means. And in order to resolve these kinds of debates, these issues and these topics often are just deleted from curricula because that's an easier way to get the Board of Education or the state to sign on to curriculum. And that's doing everybody a disservice. When we wrote the book, we did some analyses of what's going on in various states, and in Oklahoma, I don't know if anybody's here from Oklahoma, only 3% of graduating seniors in public schools in Oklahoma would pass a citizenship test. 3%. So no, we have a major problem on that front. And the second thing that I would note here is linked to what I said earlier about prioritizing political aptitude. We're a country that really has gotten to the point now where we recognize and we value volunteerism, but more in terms of charitable giving or community organizations that are apolitical, in part because people are so turned off to politics. And so until we can incentivize that, it's going to be very, very difficult to bring about change and to prepare the next generation for what they might need to do.
Microphone 4.
Hi, I'm Mary Lou Green. I'm from the state of New York, and I'm with the Scarsdale League and the Westchester County ILO. And Professor Lawless, my daughter is a student at American University, and my key goal as she finishes is that she will know who the senators are from the state of New York. She is totally uninterested. But what I have seen, and I'm just going to ask you to extrapolate from a personal situation, I have seen her express outrage at the expressions of racism and bias in this campaign. It may be too soon for you to do any assessment of that, but do you think that might be a hook to wake this generation up, that politics has an impact?
So, you know, it's one of these, it could work both ways kinds of questions, right? So one possible outcome would be, given the way that some of the candidates have said things about particular groups of people and how other candidates have been treated, that the younger generation is going to look around and say, this is completely unacceptable, we have to get involved here, this is going to motivate us to really sort of grab the bull by the horns and change the way the world works. The other alternative, and I fear the more likely outcome, is young people are just going to say, wow, this just validates everything that I thought about politics. I am completely outraged, and the current two-party system and the way that the campaigns and elections in the United States work is not something for me or something for young people. It's completely dysfunctional, and it's mean-spirited, and it's hostile, and there could be these major racist and gender ramifications that are terrible. And so I think the fact that this has now been going on for well over a year, and presidential politics are the main lens through which young people see the political world, has an ability to do a lot of damage. So I think it's too soon to tell. But I wouldn't be surprised if we wind up sort of breaking even because there was a group of young people that were so motivated and so inspired by what they thought was completely inappropriate, and another group that was so turned off and what they saw just reinforced all of their reluctance to get involved in the first place, that we see no real change overall.
I am going to take the questions from anyone who is standing at the microphone right now, because we're going to have a little extra time this morning. So I just wanted to encourage people to not keep coming to the microphone, because we do have another speaker this morning. Microphone 5.
Hi, I am Janice Katz from Ohio, the great state of Ohio, Columbus Metro League. I am a lawyer professionally, which I think is just a little bit higher than a congressional person in the rating.
Oh no, I am too. Don't say that.
Well, you know, but it is true. And I come from a family that was very political. I'm old enough to have gone to schools where we played politics in schools, and in fact, I came home once with a button after a discussion in kindergarten about a candidate, and my parents looked at it and said, honey, that's fine as long as you have an intelligent reason for supporting this individual. But I think to follow up my Cleveland colleague's statement and your answer to that, we've got to get into schools. We've got to educate people.
I'm sorry, I would ask, we need a question.
Okay, and my
because we got a lot of people waiting.
All right, my question is about the campaigns themselves and the money in them, the way they're run, even on the low levels where you have committees looking for dirt. I think this is something that turns anybody off. Thank you.
No, so it does, and we've asked over the course of the last 15 years, conducted many national surveys asking people about their attitudes toward the various mechanics of campaigns, whether they think that money is a factor. Would that, if campaigns were publicly financed, would they be more inclined to run for office? Do they think that politicians can be bought? And the data all reflect exactly what you would think. The results, though, are very consistent across men and women. And so it would generate probably more widespread interest. I don't know that publicly financing campaigns would close the gender gap in political ambition, but it would certainly encourage a lot of people who have already written off the idea to consider running for office.
Okay. Microphone 6, and I would please, I know everybody this has been so thought-provoking, but please, if you could, the faster you could get to your question, because we do have another speaker, and I want to make sure everybody gets their question in. So, Susie Bell?
I'm Susie Bell Gosley from Texas, and I'm with the Dallas League of Women Voters. My question is precisely focused on Texas and our being one of the lowest participation of women in the political process of voting. But I think a lot of Texans moved to other states, so it may affect the whole group. My thought is, my observation is that there are cultural reasons also about women not participating in many things. And I could go on a long time on this, but to be precise, I would like to know what you have observed in Texas, and if you have observed some cultural reasons. I know there are gender issues and things like that, but about culture. Does that make sense?
So all of the work that we've done, both the young people and adults over the course of the last 15 years, are based on national surveys. So no one state has thousands or even hundreds of respondents where we can do nuanced assessments. What I can tell you is that we've coded and looked at states that have a more traditional political culture and those that are more progressive. And we haven't really found differences. The gender gap in political ambition and the gender gap in interest in politics between men and women is roughly the same size regardless of where you are. And so women's lower rates of participation in some states are offset by the fact that men's rates of participation in those states are also low. So the gap stays the same. The good news is that means that a national strategy to try and encourage more women to get involved in the political system could bear fruit, because it's not necessarily cultural differences, it's more of these individual level self-doubts about whether women could run and what the political environment would look like, and recruitment efforts to get more women involved.
Thank you. Microphone 1.
Hi, my name is Jessie Lawless, and I'm with the League of Women Voters of New Orleans. I really want to thank you for making the distinction and saying that it's not that women aren't involved and that young people aren't involved, it's that they aren't involved in the specific area of electoral politics. I was wondering, given that, and kind of playing off of the question from Texas, have you noticed a distinction between racial groups or based on class, immigration status, anything like that in perceptions of empowerment?
The only difference that we uncovered that's notable has to do with race, but it's not what you think. We found that African Americans were significantly more likely, men and women alike, to be interested in running for office. After that, the second group most likely were Latinos. It was whites, where the gender gap in all of these categories was the same size, but the baseline levels of interest were significantly higher for African Americans and Latinos, in part because they were also far more likely to say that there was a political figure that they felt inspired by. And for most of these people, it was Barack Obama. It wasn't always. That suggests that for the next generation, if Hillary Clinton were to become president, she might play that kind of role for young women, and maybe that would help close the gender gap in ambition.
Microphone 2.
Hi, my name is Rin Dupes. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Knoxville, Knox County. And by the way, I'm 27 years old. I was thinking while you were talking, some of the local, at least at the local level, some of the women I know in office ran because they got mad about something. So I'm wondering if you have any information numbers on why women do run for office, and then if that's a popular reason why women do, should we focus on shifting the reason women run for office, their perception, or maybe on making them mad about something sooner?
So, 2 things. The first is that the research that we've done is a step before that, right? It's not even, so we argue that you have to consider running as an option before you decide whether to do it or not. And running and thinking about electoral politics as a means to accomplish anything is far less likely even to appear on a woman's radar screen. So we're sort of at the stage before that. But in terms of why the women who do run say that they ran, there is research that suggests that women say that they run because they care about a problem that they want to fix, and men run because they want raw power. I don't believe that research. I think that and I can say this because I ran, anybody that runs for office wants a little bit of power. Also, anybody that runs for office wants to actually do something and make a difference. But because we still have these traditional ideas about what's acceptable for women and men to say and do in society, I think what happens in a lot of these surveys is that women self-center and only say that they wanted to run because they cared about, X, Y, and Z, and men are like, yeah, I wanted to control the world. When probably the reality is they're both a little bit closer to each other than they would project.
All right, I know I promised to get it to everybody at the mic, but your questions are so good, and Jennifer, your answers are so wonderful that I'm going to take one more question, and then we're going to move on to the next speaker. So microphone 3, you've been waiting a while.
Thank you. Liz Van Kalloon, Greenwich, Connecticut League. I'm interested in your findings about the disinterested among young people in having political conversation. And I'm wondering if there might be some link to political correctness, and would be very interested in your thinking.
Some of it could have to do with political correctness. We actually found that when we did when we interviewed the young people, though, it was less than that. It was more that they didn't want to actually find out that their friends disagreed with them on certain things. And so we asked, for example, one young woman told us, for example, that she had a conversation with her friends one day about how this was heading into 2012, how she was going to vote for Obama, and 2 of her friends were like, really, you're going to vote for Obama? And she said that she knew she wanted to cut off that conversation right away because she was sort of interested in politics, and she didn't want to jeopardize the friendship, because she didn't think that she could respect them, knowing that either they weren't interested in politics or they were interested and supporting Mitt Romney at the time. So I don't know that it's political correctness. I think it's shying away from the idea of confrontation because, again, all they see are Democrats and Republicans fighting with each other. It doesn't occur to them that you could actually like each other, have good relationships, have a nice friendship, and still have different political views. Thank you.